idea for Breakfast Club started in the winter of 2004 when I had lunch with my good friend Barbara Moss. Barbara had for many years been a member of the Wednesday Breakfast Club, which at that time had been around for about 20 years. Barbara and I were in the same profession. We're both litigators with an emphasis on employment law, and so I couldn't be a member of that club. I said to Barbara during that lunch, "I just wish I could join your club. It sounds so wonderful." And she said, with Barbara's typical motherly patience, "Kate, there are enough professional women in Nashville to support more than one breakfast club." And I thought, oh, there's an idea. So I went to my friend Beth Bloom, who was an executive assistant in my law firm, and we talked about it, and we really liked the idea, but we were afraid we didn't know enough non-lawyer women to make a club. "Well," Beth said, "that's easy. We'll get Joyce McDaniel to join us in putting this together. Joyce knows everybody," which of course is true. Joyce knows everybody. So for the next several months, Joyce and her colleague Jane Farrell and Beth and I met around the conference room table in my law firm, and we put together the general outlines of what became the Breakfast Club of Nashville, or BCON. And that's how we happened. The first BCON meeting was on the first Thursday of August, 2005. By that time, we figured we had enough professional women who were interested in joining the club that we had a viable group to go forward. I remember counting the number of women in the room every Thursday morning for probably about 6 months, hoping we would eventually get to having 20 on a regular basis, which we did after about 6 months. And now I think we have probably somewhere between 30 and 40 every Thursday on a regular basis. First Thursday has a particular meaning in the club. First Thursday of every month is reserved for members only. No guests, no speakers. It's an opportunity for us to keep in touch with each other professionally and personally. We used to pass the mic all the way around the room so that the members who were there could say what was going on in their lives. As we got bigger, passing the mic and getting all the way around the room became more difficult. So sometimes we have adopted a different format, but in general, First Thursday is always reserved for an opportunity to touch base with one another. BCON has an attendance policy that is more or less enforced. The expectation has been, and the bylaws state, that every member will attend half of the meetings every quarter. There are two reasons for this. One is that BCON is a social and networking club, and if you're not there, you're not networking and socializing. And the second one is that with the limitation of one woman per profession, you're taking up a slot, and if you're not there, someone who's more active and more willing to network with us can't be there. Nevertheless, we have recognized that it's necessary to be realistic. People get busy. They get professionally busy, personally busy, they get sick. And so we do have a policy that allows a member to take a sabbatical if she wants to take an entire quarter off. And there are rules and expectations that go with that, and I won't go into those details. And we're flexible otherwise too. The half the meetings per quarter rule is not strictly applied, but it is something that we need to be mindful of so that we are all there as often as we possibly can be. Over the course of 15 years, we've developed quite a few traditions. Two of them are two special breakfasts that we have. On the first Thursday in May, we have a Mother's Day breakfast where members can bring as guests their mothers or sisters or daughters or other women who have supported them in their lives. We also had, for very many years, on the first Thursday in December, a holiday breakfast. We had live music, we had Marcia's vintage Christmas decorations, and Craig prepared a special breakfast for us. Amanda Livesey always supplied the poppers. Members were invited to bring guests. In the last couple of years, instead of that breakfast, we've had an evening holiday social. We don't meet, by the way, for the rest of December in deference to the busyness of the season. We often have opportunities to get together outside of Thursday morning breakfast. We've taken a couple of field trips for breakfast itself. There are trips sometimes to see plays or musicals, to go to Cheekwood. Khaki Fell and Joyce have occasionally hosted social gatherings with the Wednesday Breakfast Club. Members often hold dinner parties. I held some for many years that I really enjoyed. And there have been times when we have found that we wanted to discuss topics more in depth than we had the opportunity to do during a Thursday morning breakfast. There were times we gathered at Lauren Anderson's house to talk about diversity and discrimination. We've talked about our finances back in 2008 when we got scared of where we were. We've talked about retirement and what we might do after retirement. So those are all things that we've really enjoyed being able to get together to do outside of the regularly scheduled Thursday breakfasts. There are policies about bringing guests to BCON meetings. As a general rule, guests are supposed to be prospective members. Sometimes a member will bring a family member who is visiting from out of town or some other special guest. The current charge is $15 per breakfast for guests. Payment is on the honor system and checks are made out to BCON and delivered to the treasurer. There are policies about our speakers. We avoid having speakers who are in the same profession as a member. It wouldn't be in the spirit of the club to have a speaker compete with a member for business. We also are a little bit sensitive about speakers who happen to be running for public office. They are discouraged from talking about their candidacy. We try very hard to maintain a safe, politically neutral space. Although an educated electorate is fundamental, to be fully educated, our members would have to hear from all candidates, and we don't feel that we are the place to do that most of the time. There's so many things I love about BCON. I love the professional support we give each other. For some of us, that takes the form of giving business to each other. Amanda Livesey frames my pictures and helps me hang them. Marcel advised me on changes to my home decor. Barbara Tyler found rugs for my house. Lynn Wilkinson has done multiple home improvements for members. Linda Elminger is a banker to many of us. Khaki and Phil have created many family portraits and headshots. We also give each other professional support and advice when challenges arrive. This is particularly true of the B3 group that met on Friday mornings for several years. There's also an astounding level of personal support among us. If you need a service, email the membership, and within an hour you'll have a half dozen replies with recommendations. If you're having a rough time, it's likely a BCON member will find out about it and will make sure that you get what you need. Soon after Carmen April joined BCON, her apartment complex burned and she lost most of her belongings. We took up a collection to help tide her over. When the 2020 tornado hit Nashville and destroyed Hatcher & Fell Photography's building and badly damaged Stephanie Huffman's house, Lynn Wilkinson had a work cruise at both locations before lunch, securing what was left. Over the years, we've shared life changes, numerous career changes, quite a few marriages and births, children growing up, a few divorces, and sadly a few deaths. When I first wrote this history in 2012, I was able to count each one of those changes, but there are too many now. Through the newsletter and at First Thursdays, we've learned about each other's spouses, pets, children's, mothers, vacations, house sales and purchases. I think there are only 6 of us who have been here for all 15 years of the club. Of the 4 founders, 2 are still members. Of the first 10 presidents, 5 are still members. People move on for lots of reasons. I'm really pleased to say that I've remained close friends with many former members and that my BCON friends are my best friends. I actually remember, I think, all of the presidents in order. The 4 founders were the initial officers, and I was called the president, but really it was a team effort. Beth was primarily in charge of programs. Joyce kept the books. Jane was primarily in charge of the membership roles. And soon it became clear that the officers needed to be divided by the most important functions. So we had the president, we had the treasurer, we had the secretary, and then vice president of membership, vice president of social activities, and vice president of programs. After we started publishing the newsletter, we added a vice president of newsletter, but that was eventually rolled into the secretary position. Early on, we decided that the vice president of membership was also the president-elect. This is because the vice president of membership got to know all of the members, and she also proved herself to be dedicated and well-organized. Often, anyway, the vice president works harder than the president does. Now, here's the list, as I remember it, of the presidents after me. Nancy DeCad, Jana Lyle Parham, Lauren Anderson, Nancy Allen, Patricia King, Nancy Coop, Carolyn Schott, Samantha Boyd, Susan Hammonds-White, Norma Shirk, Lindsay Roberts, Barbara Tyler, Julia Baker, and Jenny Smith. One of the basic tenets we adopted from the Wednesday Club is the one woman per profession rule. Now, the purpose of this rule is twofold. First, to maximize the professional diversity of the club, but also to ensure that there's no professional competition within the club. Now, you might have noticed that that doesn't mean there's only one lawyer in the club, but it does mean that none of the lawyers who are in the club practice in the same area, and so we don't compete with each other. This respect for one another's professional spheres, which is really essential to the club, extends to speakers as well. We try to avoid having speakers whose presentations could be seen as competing with a member's business. When we decided on a name for the club, we intentionally left out the word women because we thought maybe someday men would be joining the club, if that's the way it ultimately evolved. I like men in general, but I think we're all pretty happy that it never went in that direction. The other words in the name of the club were pretty simple: Breakfast Club Nashville. And it was inevitably shortened to BCON. There was even, for a while, a newsletter that Laura Register gave us the name for, Be Connected. It was cute. Well, our first meeting place was the Mad Platter restaurant in Germantown. We didn't actually pick it because Joyce said, "I've got this." She talked to her sister, Marcia Jervis, who with her husband, Craig, owned the Mad Platter restaurant. They agreed to open for us every Thursday morning. For a little over 11 years, they welcomed us like family, giving us delicious meals and allowing us to go behind the counter or into the kitchen for special items. Sadly for us, at the end of 2016, Marcia and Craig decided to retire. They sold the restaurant, and BCOM put together a search committee to find a new venue for us. We eventually settled on the Germantown Cafe, which was just around the corner from the Mad Platter restaurant. It was about the same size as the Mad Platter and had a lot of the same feel. We were very happy there for a little over 3 years. But then in March of 2020, the tornado badly damaged the Germantown Cafe. They closed. They were hoping to reopen in July, so we moved temporarily to Cabana. And that worked very well for about 3 weeks, and then COVID hit. And we ended up having to stop meeting in person altogether. We met during the pandemic by Zoom, thanks to Cynthia Moon. The financials of BCON are established by the board. Members pay quarterly dues in an amount that the board determines. The biggest expense that we have is for the breakfast. We pay by the plate. There are also expenses for the website, for supplies, and for occasional social events. Dues were initially $125 a quarter, which was plenty for us to do our breakfast, and also left us some money over that to pay for new AV equipment, for social events, and even to provide an honorarium for speakers to donate to a charity of their choice. But as the expenses for BCON increased with more and more members and more expenses for the breakfast, We found that the amount of dues was not sustainable, and so we increased dues. Before COVID hit, dues were $135 a quarter. And that's a pretty good deal, we think, for such an excellent breakfast and all the great things that we get to go with it. Joining BCon is really pretty easy. Main thing we want to make sure of is that a member is a good fit. Sometimes a prospective member finds us on the web and comes to a meeting on our own. More often, a BCon member acts as sponsor by inviting someone to come and visit and see if they want to join. All prospective members are expected to come to 2 meetings before they join. This again is to make sure that it's a good fit, to be sure that they don't mind being somewhere at 7:30 every Thursday morning, and also to make sure that the one woman per profession rule is followed in every instance. After those 2 meetings, the prospective member submits an application, which gets vetted by the board and then by the membership. And this is, again, mostly to ensure that there's no violation of that one woman per profession rule. If there are no unresolvable objections, the new member pays their dues, gets access to the website, and becomes a member. Sponsors of members don't have a lot of responsibilities other than inviting the prospective member to come to a breakfast. They are supposed to host the prospective member at those 2 breakfasts, assist them in filling out their application, and explain to them how the Breakfast Club works. After that, the only thing we really ask is that a sponsor keep in touch with the new member to make sure that everything's still going as everyone would want it to.